Welcome to the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser. Now that I'm done directing the development and first episode of the second series of Space Station Animation, I'm joining up with Steamroller Animation to push the boundaries of the art form. Thanks to the support of so many of you, I'm continually developing more than 10 dynamic feature film pitches while mastering the art of telling deeply meaningful stories. Today we have Everett Downing Jr. on the show. I am so happy I got you on the show. It was kind of, a stab in the dark, and I'm so glad it happened. I actually tried to hunt you down at Lightbox, and I'm so glad that you're here to talk about your extremely talented background. If you don't know Everett's work, he just launched a series called My Dad the Bounty Hunter on Netflix. That was his brainchild, which is amazing. However, his background goes really, really deep. He's been in the industry for many years, working as both an animator and a story artist, which isn't extremely common for people to work in both of those at a high level. And he's worked on projects such as Ice Age as an animator, Ratatouille, Up, WALL-E, Maya and the Three recently, which is another Netflix series, which you can see behind him. There's a picture of from Maya and the Three, a piece of art there. And he's also won an Emmy for his directing in an episode of We the People. You can see that other poster behind him. You can also see he's a family man, and an extremely hard worker. What a hustler. And can't wait to get more into it. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that intro?
Well, first I just want to say thank you for inviting me on the show. This is exciting. I want to make one clarification. The show My Dad the Bounty Hunter, it was a co-creation of me and my partner Patrick Harpin. So
yes, awesome.
Really excited about that work. But yeah, let's get into it.
Co-creations, though, I mean, a lot of times when people are known as directors, the studio came up with the project and then they assign a director to it, right? So yeah. I would really like to get into, you talked about before the show about how you've had all these years of hustle and just trying to get project after project going, and then that one panned out. What was the catalyst that made that happen? Let's talk about the journey there.
All right, how much time do we have? No, it's a very cool story, but it's very convoluted. And
yeah,
as you know, we do this for a long time. I decided in basically 2014, I decided I want to try to direct something. I want to start pitching. So that's really kind of when I started pitching a lot, and I've been pitching for years. And there was one project that I've been pitching around town for a long time, almost since I started. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called Book of Mojo. I did
I am familiar with Book of Mojo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did an Indiegogo for it. And I wasn't able to ever finish the project, but I did pitch it around several places, and it got a lot of heat, but never no one ever ended up biting the bullet and going for it. I pitched it several times over at Netflix actually, and I got a lot of traction over there.
Yeah.
There's actually one of the executives, Jenna Boyd. I pitched her several times. She really liked it. She kept telling me, "This is great. Keep working on it. Keep working on the pitch." And after the second pitch, I was like, okay, you know what? I really want to make sure this next time lands. So I'm not going to pitch it again until I feel like it's really singing, right?
Yeah.
And around this time, it's so complicated. Around this time, I was actually, I'm like, let me figure this out. I'm not going to pitch it anymore. I was working at Sony, right? And I was in development at Sony, and my development executive was Karen Tolliver, who's now actually running feature animation over at Netflix.
Yeah.
While I was working on it, she, which I didn't know at the time, was a producer for Hair Love.
Oh. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she asked me to consult a little bit on it. And I had sat down with her and Matthew Cherry and basically asked them a bunch of questions and gave them a bunch of advice. And after a week or so later, she called me up and invited me to co-direct on that. And
that's awesome.
That whole track actually was able to get it was a phenomenal journey, first of all.
Yeah.
And that was able to give me a lot of traction, I think. So when I ended up on Maya and the Three, working on that one, Jenna Boyd ran into me and she's like, "Hey, do you still have that Mojo idea? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And she's like, I want to introduce you to someone. And she introduced me to Megan Casey, who just happened to be the executive on My End of Three.
Hmm.
And she loved the idea. But at the same time we were pitching Mojo, we were actually pitching Dad around town. Pat and I have
Ah,
been developing it at
nice.
Sony. So I met Pat at Sony, and we kind of started developing this as like kind of like our like lunchtime sort of like passion project basically. And um, we had pitched it around several places, and it had started getting some traction at Skydance. Actually, um, it was we were about to go. It was about to go to Skydance, and then
Wow.
um, I I think Jorge kind of like let Megan know, like, hey, so like Everett's really doing some really cool stuff. You should maybe like take a look at it. And she ended up, she's like, what's this thing? What's he got at Skydance? And she ended up asking me like, what is it? And I gave her the elevator pitch for my dad at Boneyard, and she's like, I want that too. So she wanted to get both Mojo and Dad. But she really felt like these are both really great ideas, but like, I really think that Dad is like super special. Like, I want to start this one first. I was like, all right, let's do it. So that kind of set me off on the path. So like I said, it was very, very twisty, very windy, but
Oh
it's pretty
yeah,
cool.
it sounds so familiar.
Yeah. I mean, that's how these things happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, you have a little thread here, so you kind of hold on to that little
Yep.
thread, and then oh, there's another one. And you kind of start to kind of pull them together, and they start to build a tapestry, right?
Absolutely.
Where
Absolutely.
most of the time is, at least when we dream about how we're going to get our project off the ground, we think, oh yeah, I'm just going to pitch this one project, it's going to happen. And yeah.
That's never the case.
Yeah, I was actually working for a Kickstarter company back when the Hair Love, when both of
Oh,
your crowdfunding campaigns came up. That's why I
oh,
was
that's
so
amazing.
familiar with them, because I was actually consulting for this company, building them a video and page design team.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, so I studied them. I backed Hair Love. It was amazing to see that one, like, be pitched and then make a
Yeah.
bunch of money and then happen. And then I walked to Walmart and the book's on the shelf.
Yeah. It was amazing.
It really was an amazing thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, you just kind
That
of
was
ride those
incredible.
waves, is what it seems.
Yeah. It was one of those things like I remember seeing the Hair Love Kickstarter and going like, this is special. I want
Yeah.
to I want to contribute. And I even like emailed Matt and those guys. And like, hey, I'm an animation professional. I'd love to be a part of this. Like, but they were getting so much like,
Oh yeah, I did the
you
same
know,
thing.
yeah. So I'm sure they were like,
So
so
yeah,
I thought it was really funny that like that the serendipity of
it
like
still happened.
running, it still happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's incredible.
that's amazing. Yeah, and that happens. That happens when you're moving and you're constantly improving your work, and also like just trying to make connections with people, and showing interest in what they're working on, and contributing in some way. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's super important. It's one of the things like one of my big things that is I'm always like, I like the pitches because it's great, but also just meeting people, and I've always like to leave really good impressions because you're just never sure. You never, like it's really served me well. I've met a lot of really great people who remember me, like, oh, like, where's that thing that you pitched? Oh, I'd love to, do you have any more ideas? Like I really try to leave good impressions with people. So
yeah, same here. Seems like you do. you know, and something I really want to point out about your story, just a bookmarked it in my mind when you talked about the Book of Mojo crowdfunding campaign.
yes,
But you never finished the Book of Mojo. I should point out that there still is a pattern of finishing in your story where you finish
yes,
the crowdfunding campaign. Like
yes.
that right there is big. The content I saw of that was really highly developed, so there was a level of finishing going on there. So it's probably a no-brainer when they're like, this guy is capable of so much. He's worked on all these projects. Let's put him into the co-director seat on Hair Love, and then you obviously grabbed Jorge Gutierrez's attention, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
It's it's
so
it's it's a snowball effect. And to be clear, like there is
snowball
a
effect.
done yeah,
Yeah.
there is a done version of that short. That's literally we were just looking to try to get it through lighting and stuff, and that last final push. getting it through rendering and lighting and all that stuff is very complicated. Like a lot of
Expensive.
animation is done. It's expensive. It's
Yeah.
very expensive. So that's kind of where we stalled. And at some point, I'll make a web page just dedicated to so I can share a lot of, like, you're right. There's so much incredible work that was done, and there was so many talented people who worked on that who are now doing really awesome things at some of the bigger studios. So
Yeah.
I would love to share that work with people at some point.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Wonderful. So, you let's touch on the subject of you doing both storyboarding and animating at a high level.
Yeah,
Just talk to that. Like, how did that come about? How have you been able to ride both of those waves kind of simultaneously? And
yeah, that
yeah,
is another windy and
yeah,
very complicated story. So this actually kind of started right really at the beginning of my career. So, you know, when the way I got involved in animation is kind of twisted because I was wanted to be a comic book artist at one point,
yeah.
and I was studying illustration comic art at like SVA in New York, and
Okay.
I ended up switching majors, and because I found this like love of animation, and I was like,
Yeah.
man, I really want to animate. Like I'd seen like Toy Story and like Aladdin and a bunch of movies, and like Akira blew my mind. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I want to learn how to animate. So um, as I was learning how to animate in school, one of my instructors like really loved my boards. We had like a 2D. I mean, it was a 2D drawing. 2D animation class that actually was like part of the class was storyboarding.
Yeah.
Um, and he actually ended up becoming my mentor. He was actually working at Big Idea at the time as like one of their like sole story artist. His name
Hmm.
is Luis Contreras,
Yeah.
and I love that man. Like I owe so much to him. He really gave me like a passion for storytelling and a passion for story art.
Yeah.
Um, and sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but he was just so incredible. So it's one of those things where it's like I want to animate, but this story thing, like I ended up getting a job as a story artist. So I was like, and I kind of put together, like, oh, of course, like I wanted to be a comic book artist, so it kind of makes sense. This makes sense, right? But as I was working in story, I was still in school, like learning animation, and I really was like, I want to animate. So I did storyboards for a couple years while I was in school at Big Idea,
Ah.
right? And
Ah.
then as I was doing that, I got the opportunity, like, oh, I really want to animate. They were Big Idea was developing this new show called 321 Penguins at the time,
Okay.
and I was like on the ground floor of that. So I helped, like, a bunch of us got together and we helped figure out the look, and we helped figure out, like, like I modeled characters, I did some character design. We all like kind of pitched in. It was just that was the sort of spirit of it, and that was the first thing I animated on, right? And that actually got me the job. Like I animated for this show, and then that got me a job at Blue Sky Studios on my
Yeah.
first feature, which was the Ice Age.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
but because I had this like strong background in story, once I finished on Ice Age, when they were working on robots, they were like, "Oh, I had some downtime," and they were like, "Well, do you want to do animation testing or do you want to do story?" And they invited me to like help out in the story department because I had
Oh.
that story background, and that sort of set up the pace. Like, I would do things where I would go and I would animate, and then between the films, I would spend a little bit of time in story. This is where it gets kind of like hilarious and complicated as usual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So of course, I'm like, I want to be an animator, right? And I'm doing storyboards. And then as soon as I started animating, I'm like, I really miss
I
storyboarding. And
know.
so,
Oh, I
yeah,
relate to this so much.
yeah. So I was like, is there a way I can get back into story? So I ended up like fighting to get back into story on right. I just finished um a test for Horton Hears Who.
Ooh,
That
awesome.
yeah, Jimmy Hayward was directing a while back, and
Yeah.
I was like, they finally made the jump, right? Okay, yeah, we're gonna put you in on the ground floor on this new movie we're doing called Legend of the Leaf Men, which ended up turning into Epic,
Epic. Yep.
basically. And as I'm doing that, a good friend of mine who's in the animation department is like, "Hey, Everett, Pixar's looking for people." I was like, "What?" I'm like, "That's awesome." And he's like, "They're looking for animators." I was like, "Ah, I just switched into the story department." And it was
Yeah.
so tough for me, but I'm like, I really wanted to work at Pixar. I'm like, I got it. That's like the one place I want to work at. I'm like, it's no big deal. And I've been rejected by them like 2 times already. So I'm like, it's no big deal.
Yeah,
I'll put
yeah.
a portfolio together. They won't select me. I'll keep doing it. So of course, they end up like, yeah, we want you to. And I'm like, I have to go to Pixar. It's Pixar. And
Yeah.
I ended up working on the first movie I worked on over there was Ratatouille. So
My favorite.
I'd been, yeah, it's an amazing movie.
So
It was
good.
so much so much fun to work on. And
Yeah.
before that, I would try, like when I told you I got rejected from Pixar twice. Once was for uh, The Incredibles. I really tried to get on The Incredibles because it combined my two things I love, which is superheroes and animation. And
Yeah.
I love Brad Bird's, like, you know,
Yeah, Iron Giant.
Iron Giant was just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So getting on Ratatouille for me was like a huge dream. So I'm working, like I said, it gets complicated. So I worked in animation for a few years. I worked on everything from Ratatouille all the way up to Monsters University, right? Like, which was such like 6 or 7 films. They were all
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
And then there was this kind of call like, hey, we had like internally Pixar wanted to see if they could pull some people from animation into story, like, just to kind of test it out and see if they can get some animation sensibility in there.
Huh.
And I was one of the few people that they invited to be a part of that. And I was like, yes, I want
That's
to do
so
that.
cool.
So I was actually able to make the transition, and um, it was great. And that's kind of from there on. I kind of stay. I made the decision like, okay, I'm going to stay in animation. But by that time, I already had like 16 years of animation under my belt, so it
Yeah.
was great.
That's but you stayed in animation, not story.
No, actually went into story.
Oh, okay, okay, cool.
So went
Wow.
into story after Monsters University, and then stayed in the story after
Oh,
that.
that's such a cool story. Really relate to it too because I I've had very similar things. It's like to survive.
Yes.
To
Yes.
survive, I've been like, oh, I can storyboard too, and so I'm doing the storyboard stuff on the side, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I can animate. Oh yeah, and then there were some places where I like had to do every piece of the puzzles. Sometimes,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you need a
Yeah.
character design. Oh yeah, sure, I'll do a character design for you. Oh, you need color? Yeah, I'm really good at color. Let's jump in and do some color for you. you know?
Yeah. That
So yeah,
big idea was a little bit.
you paused for a second. A big idea was what?
Oh, big idea was kind of like that for me. It was where I had to be kind of like what they would call it a generalist. So I
Yeah,
could
yeah,
do, character design. I could do, storyboards. I can model.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's interesting though. It sounds like you've kind of been on and off a generalist in a way, at least between story and animation, and then yeah. Still, as a director, that generalist mindset has probably helped a lot.
it definitely has, it's like, the one thing that's kind of cool is when you're in the trenches, you can, the thing that you don't realize is like the peripherals. So like if I'm in story, I got like a really cool peripheral of like, oh, I can see a little bit of what editing is like is doing. I see what biz dev is doing, and being in animation, it's like, oh, I can see downwind. I can see like, oh, what is layout doing?
Mm-hmm.
What is lighting doing?
Oh,
So
lighting.
it really gives you like this really great like cross section of the animation process. So
Yeah,
I became very familiar with a lot of it. So
it's awesome. So let's talk about that now. Let's talk about like what were your favorite and least favorite parts about directing? Like you don't even have to say least favorite; they'd be the hardest parts, like the biggest challenges or whatnot. On My Dad the
um,
Bounty Hunter.
well, I will say that I genuinely found it like a very enjoyable experience. Like it was very cool. It was. I mean, I don't want to throw this word around. It was magical. It's like it was amazing because it's like you get a chance to really like. I've been someone who's worked for directors all the time, and like I'm
Yeah.
used to like trying to get them what they want. So a lot of it's sort of getting in their mindset and trying to figure out, like asking questions. And now, you know, being in the driver's seat is like, oh no, I'm the guy now who they're coming to. And like a lot of like, I think because I paid so much attention to all the different productions that I've been on, and I like to make like notes about a lot of things. Like,
Mm.
oh, I noticed that on this production that was an issue, so I probably won't do that. Or like, oh, that worked really great on this other production. I'm going to try that when if I ever get into that situation. And I feel like it really served me well. So
Yeah.
one of the things I really enjoyed the most was actually like just kind of that like the alchemy of like seeing the ideas sort of come to life. Like I love going to the reviews and like seeing the artwork and like saying like, oh, mix that and that, and then you see these characters come to life, and like that part of it to me is always magical. I just love it so much. I love that energy. The one thing I think is really one of the tougher aspects is, but I don't shy away from it. But I think there's that ownership where it's like, you know, I I don't know if they cover like, how do you handle like, you know, when you're the boss and you have to make, I mean, there's like hard decisions that you have
Yeah.
to make or hard conversations that you have to have with people and that sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Uh-huh.
So that's something that I was like, oof, man, this is not the this is this is not the best thing, best part of it, but
Yeah.
it's also the most necessary because, like for me, I feel like it's my job to make sure that the production is healthy,
Yes.
So um
Yes. And
but that
sometimes
that
people,
means
even
that
with good
sometimes you have
intentions, yeah,
yes,
they need a
yes,
talking to, you know,
yeah,
or we
yeah,
need to
and
work together to figure out like if it's bad enough. Sometimes it's like, hey, how can we work to fix this? Or
yes,
sometimes it's just like, this is a course correction. I know this is a tough conversation, but we've got to have it because we both fail if we don't have this
yep.
conversation.
100%, 100%. And the thing that I know from my point of view, which is why I think it's really great, like, working for people, it's great. And then when you become a boss, when you become a director or whatever,
Yeah.
it really it really shows you like, okay, so like now I know why they were asking me to do certain things and
Hmm.
and I find that like if you want to keep everything healthy, you got to have that. You got to be willing to be transparent and just kind of let people, like you said, like have that hard course correction where it's just like, hey, I know you think this is really great, but like just kind of let them know, like, hey, this is how things are working, and yeah, one thing that you do, I know you're trying to help, but like actually creates more work. That's not that. That said, I do think you're just doing a really really good job, just kind of like getting them to like change their energy or change their focus,
Yeah.
without demoralizing them, right? That's the part
Right.
you don't want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the last place I was directing. There was a certain animator that they said this animator will not work here. Like, it's either we
Yeah.
fire this animator or we have this animator work with you. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And they said we think you can turn him around, right? So we had a conversation and it worked. It worked.
yeah,
And that animator's still at that studio, so it's a great outcome. But that was when I sat on for a couple weeks just thinking it
yeah,
through and
yeah,
thinking like, what is the best possible solution for this? I luckily had a bit of time. Sometimes you have to go and it's like, you need to solve this
yeah,
problem today.
yeah.
um, and at that point, I don't know what you do. Lock yourself in a room and just ponder. Yeah, but
But they don't. But there's not a lot of training for that sort of thing. So
yeah,
that is. I don't know about you, but it wasn't surprising. But it's like, yeah, that's right. This is a big part of it. So
yeah. I've had to read a lot of books on leadership and
yep,
interpersonal
same here.
communication, and
Yep,
yeah, that's been, I
communication.
think,
Yep,
yeah, where the training comes in, which is useful.
it is. It really is.
It's useful.
Listening to a lot of podcasts and stuff about
Yes, podcasts. That's,
it.
yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to learn. So very, very cool. And I wanted to speak more to that, but we actually did. So that's great. Um, awesome. Can we kind of back up a little bit? I would really
Yeah.
like to talk about the Book of Mojo and just
Yes.
just the process of crowdfunding. I actually haven't really gotten into a crowdfunding zone much in this livecast, even though
Yeah.
I've personally done four four campaigns
Yeah.
myself, and then I helped
Yeah.
build a company, like a video and page design team, to help another company with Kickstarters, and so I have a lot of expertise in that zone, and we've never gotten to talk about it. So let's talk about crowdfunding a little bit. Like, how
Yeah.
you did it pretty early on. It wasn't as common back then.
I did it pretty early on. I was one of those the people who kind of dived in, and
Yeah.
it's funny because I feel like I'm one of the people that's like that you would learn from, like, this is a good case of what not to do. Like, not that it was bad, but like
Yeah.
it was just like there was a lot of things that, like, there were some tips I did know, and then there's some tips that I figured out later, and people told me like, oh man, because the thing I kept hearing is like, after it was done a couple months later, or 6 to 8 months later, people are like, wait, I saw this thing. I didn't know you were doing that. I got that so much. Like,
Yeah.
I would have totally done that. So the
Oh.
biggest thing that I learned was just like building that audience,
Oh yeah.
like just starting out and saying like, hey, you know what? I got this pretty good idea. I have this comic book. I want to pitch it, just like letting people in on the ground floor, like creating a page for it, and like starting to post art, like, oh, this is some stuff, like, oh, look, I'm talking to this person, just to kind of get that conversation out there, just to sort of just to there's a certain amount of like social media savvy that you should have, just
Yeah.
to start to kind of build that audience.
Yeah.
And then there's also this idea of like pre-prep, in terms of like, you know putting together an email list of all your friends, and like
Yeah.
letting them know like, hey, I'm going to launch this, like, if you like it or you think it's cool or whatever, like, let people know. And I did that, but just not to the same extent. So what you're kind of doing is like, there's a period of, I would probably say, like 6 months
Yeah.
that you want to
At
do a
least.
pre-build. At least
Yeah.
6 to 8 months where you want to do a pre-build, and just sort of like start to get that hype going. It can be, I've seen that it can be shorter. I think I say 6 to 8 months for what we were trying to do. We're trying to put something together where we have, we're trying, oh, I want to put the funds together for, to do an animatic, or I want to do like, we're looking to do animation. But if you're doing something like a comic and you've got like a lot of pages done, like, I think it's a little bit, you can have a smaller window, I think.
Mhm.
Especially if you have a good following. If you're like really active on social media and you have a good following, I don't think you need quite as big a build up. Animation for like a short, I definitely think you need that build up. You definitely need to get that going and
Yeah.
start getting people excited about this project. Um, Another thing that I would probably do differently is which I thought about later, I was like, oh, that's what I should have done. Kind of do it in milestones, in terms of like Kickstarter part 1, the animatic. Like, hey, I'm looking for this amount of money. I'm gonna get a bunch of my friends
Oh,
together, and we're
interesting.
gonna do an animatic, and once it's done, like, I'm gonna use it to, attract talent to it. And then the next thing is like, all right, we got this animatic. It looks great. Check it out. And you share that with everyone, right? And then say like, next milestone, we're gonna go for animation. So we're putting together like a crowdfunding for that. So you can kind of break it out into these big. Because honestly, trying to get a big lump sum for for a whole animation project is like, it's so difficult.
It is hugely difficult.
It's so challenging.
Yeah. My short film Kickstarter failed,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
happy
So
about it. The reason why is because you owe a lot to, as it
yes,
builds up. It raised $14,000, but my goal was like 50, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. And it's
and
hard to get that lump sum. Like
yeah.
a buddy of mine who he does a lot of comic book Kickstarters, and he was like, oh man, he's like, he's the one who kind of gave me the idea, like, oh, you should have done something smaller.
Yeah.
He's like, do smaller things. He's like, oh, my first project is just 5,000, because what you want to do is like, it's so much prep, Scott. It's
Oh,
literally
oh,
just
I
like,
know.
it's like the build up to the prep to the Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter is you just try to get like establish a reputation for yourself. So he's like, I'll do something small. So that's why I was kind of like, oh man, if I did something that was just the animatic and I had something to share with it, and like, then people knew, like, if it was a small amount of money, like 5 to 10 grand, right? Probably would have made it. People go like,
Probably
oh,
would
well,
have,
he
yeah.
did. They look you up. Go, oh, this guy, he's worked at like Pixar, Netflix. Oh, yeah, I'll do it. And then they say, like, oh, he's funded something before. So you kind of get that, like, that sort of groundswell going.
Yeah.
I would do it so differently now.
Oh, I know. I've done every single one of them. I've done differently, and then a lot of times I'll make all these plans, and it's like at least half of them fall through. With their
Yes, yes,
productiveness of like the marketing. Like I have all these marketing plans, and then it's like, oh, all of those didn't work. And honestly, the thing that works the best is like door-to-door sales is kind of what it feels
Yeah.
like. It's like everywhere I
Yeah.
go, I can't assume that somebody saw it on social media. I'm like,
Yep.
I'm working on this project, and then I wait. Nope, they didn't see it on social media. And then, I can continue with the pitch. And,
Yep.
I sold a lot of my books, in person. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's that's been huge. The Kickstarter actually not funding was for my short film Layers, and that
Oh.
one not funding was actually good because there was a grant. Like
Oh,
that I was
okay.
able to take all of that prep that I'd put into the Kickstarter, throw a pitch
Oh.
together, and then get this grant. So, you know, you also have to be flexible. If it doesn't fund, that
Yes.
doesn't mean it's the end. You know,
Yep.
you can find another
Yep.
way to make it, even if it's you making it in your basement over 5 years. You can figure
Which
out
I
how to
definitely
finish it.
did.
Yeah.
Which I definitely did,
Yeah, yeah, but that paid
And
off, right? And
it really does. It really does. Like there's so many people who like they just knew about me. When I say people, I mean like obviously, colleagues who work in the industry, but then like, because I was pitching all the time, you know, Mojo was just one of the ideas I was pitching, but
right,
everyone's like, oh yeah, oh man, that was really cool. And you also have, so I got a reputation, like you said, like I've got like all these assets and like I'd work with people and like it was really good quality. So people were like, well, this is what this guy can do scraping by. Like I wonder what, like, that he could probably handle a crew and he probably could work with a budget and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
people remember that. It really serves me. It really served me well.
right, right. I think I'd like to throw a little caveat just for some feedback that I've gotten from different audience members and guests before, where we're all talking about this is great. I've met a lot of people who dreamt of becoming a director and they start going down this path. Like they're like, okay, now I'm pitching. Oh,
Yeah.
I hate this. You know.
Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah.
And I think that it's okay. It's okay to hate it.
Yes, it
If
is.
it's something you like, I think Martin Scorsese in his masterclass said, if you don't like, if you think that it would be fun to be a director, this course is not for you. If this is like you can't do anything else, this course is for you.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if it's something like you feel like you might hate it, but you just can't not do it, then yeah, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Absolutely, keep hustling it. And you can see that every one of these things that may look like a failure, like Book of Mojo,
Yeah.
it's not a failure. You completed the Kickstarter campaign. You've completed most of the short film. Someday you'll have a website dedicated to it, and you'll be able to show that work you finished.
Mhm.
And you developed yourself as a person, and then when you were able to direct on Hair Love, you were able to deliver and hit a home
Right.
run there.
Right.
And same with Maya and the Three and with My Dad the Bounty Hunter. I
You know,
watched
it's
that
it.
whole series, by the way, as
Oh.
preparation for this. So
Oh, fantastic!
yeah,
Awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed
enjoyed it.
it.
Yeah, the kids enjoyed it too.
That's good. Oh, that's great. That's great. I
Yeah,
mean, that show was so special. Like the crew was just amazing, and they put a lot of passion and heart into it. I feel like you can feel it when you watch the show. Like you can feel it's in all the pixels. So yeah, it was amazing experience.
what is one of the things that you learned on Book of Mojo that you don't feel like you could learn anyway, but it still benefits you today?
Um, you know, oh, you know what? There's one thing. Yeah. Um, it's kind of that what you're saying of like learning, and I think this is anytime you do indie stuff is like making things work,
Yeah,
figuring out how to like think on your feet and like improvise and and you just get this level of hustle, like
yeah,
you just get this like, oh no, like so you know you kind of become unflappable, right? So it's just like, no, I've worked on this project that I had like no money, like hardly any money for, and then like we had to make certain things work, and like the pipeline was broken at one point. We had to figure out all this stuff. Like, oh,
right.
this isn't working. These things aren't rendering anymore. Why? Tracking it down. So by the time I got on something official, and you got like real support and like real, it's like all these things happening. Like, oh yeah, no, that's no problem. Blah, blah, blah. Like everything seems like I don't want to say easy, but like you're just used to that like that hustle that you have to do.
Yeah, it's not that that's easy. It's just possible.
It's just possible, and you're
Yeah,
just used to like, okay, so all right, that's you've kind of proven yourself
yeah,
like on a smaller form. So yeah,
yeah. I love that.
yeah, it's really great.
That's a cool one. That's a cool one. Is there anything you've learned from working on a big production that you couldn't have learned working on a indie production?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, obviously, working on Dad is the first time I was plugged all the way through, and
Yeah,
it's a machine. It's a bigger
yeah,
machine, so you realize it's like, okay, cool. So there are so many moving parts. Like once the farthest I think I gotten was like starting to get into lighting, but this is like post, sounds. You know what I mean? You know, like really getting in on like locks and like shipping things
yeah.
to the
Putting
studio
things at
and
the right
like
amount of quality, right? Dialing that in.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. There's also, and this kind of goes back to that question you're asking earlier, like what are some of the things that or I learned is unexpected and just like, I came from feature, so like working on a series was very different. It's a different pace, and you realize something's like, oh, we were going for a certain quality, and I think we really were able to get an amazing quality, especially considering the budget. I think our show looks fantastic.
Yeah, it looks
But then when
fantastic. Absolutely. Like
thank
some of
you.
the best rigs in a show of that quality I've ever seen.
Oh
It's
man,
yeah.
so impressed with Dwarf. But then there's things like on an animated features, like a shot will come through, like it can come through like three, 4 or 5 times, and it's like no, you get 2 passes at this, and it's like what? And learning to prioritize, like okay, all right, cool. So the face animation is that can work, and just prioritizing like the biggest things first. Hey, if
Oh,
you can like hit this first, and then like if you can get back, if not, don't worry about it. Like you got to compromise. You got to be able to like go like, oh yes, I want this to be better, but what's the most impactful changes that I can make to make this shot better? So that's
yeah.
definitely a different skill that
It
I had to
is, especially
develop.
in a few passes.
Yes, yes,
That's something I'm learning right now. Actually,
yeah,
we want to show on the project I'm working on the client only a few times. It's
yeah.
like, oh, if we only want to show 3 times, I have to get this done in each of these
Yes.
passes. And
Yes.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good learning curve to
It
go on.
it is.
When
A
you,
lot of
I'm,
compromise.
yeah, yeah. When you do, I'm sure you do a lot of interviews. Is there a question you just wish people would ask you about?
Oh man. I think you're doing a pretty good job. There's not really like I mean, I'm trying to think of you got some really good ones because like, I never get a lot of questions about the nitty-gritty in terms of like even like the crowdfunding and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I think that stuff is fun. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I would really love to kind of share with you guys. Oh, you know what? One thing I think is really great is that I touched on it, but I'm really proud of is just like working on these shorts and like working with the talented people who are on it. Like I'm really proud of like a lot of them like being able to like kind of go on and sometimes you're in a situation where it's like I always try to pay at least something to try to pay at least something, but sometimes like I'm always like trying to pay it forward, right? So if someone is working for me, I will say like definitely use anything that you've done here in the portfolio, and they have to really great effect. Like I'm really proud to say like a lot of people have gone on to work at places like Pixar, Netflix, and Disney. So I'm really happy about that.
That is really huge.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because you
great.
had your passion project. That's what's so beautiful about animation is that you have your passion project and you're bringing in people to work on it, but you have the ability to like unleash this power in all these different people that you're working with, which is just, I mean, that's just extremely invigorating. And I'm glad you see that.
Yeah. One thing we talked about, Scott, before we went on was like how sometimes it's like, you know, it's really hard to get original content out there.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I really do feel like indie is like a really great way to do it. It's also a really good way to kind of prove yourself.
Yes.
Um, and this also touches back to what you were talking about earlier about like, it's just something that I want to do when it comes to directing and stuff. And I remember there was a point where I decided like I could stay. This is right, like right when I decided I was going to start pitching. I could
Yeah.
stay where I'm at and be totally happy
Hmm.
and just animate and just be cool. Like just do my own comics, like whatever, just chill out. Or I could try this, um, but I don't know if I like it. I don't like. I think I want to direct, but I don't know if I like it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I worked on a short and working on a short. it was very hard. And
Yeah.
it was very difficult. But then when I did, I was like, yeah, I kind of have to do that. So you really do have to have that sort of moment where, and I recommend anybody who's really interested in directing, direct a short, direct something short and digestible. If nothing else, you might find like that was awful, I never want to do it again. Or you might find like, oh, that was fun, I don't know if I have the talent for it. Like that's what I was worried about.
Or if you'd rather just
Or
animate, which is okay.
or if you rather just
You may even
animate,
have the
right?
talent for it, but you may be just like, I really love animating, you know?
Yes,
I just want to do
yes,
this. And it's like, yes, do it, you know? You don't have to
absolutely,
be something that you're not. And that's a great lesson to
absolutely.
learn. I
Yeah,
also love that your Emmy, this is something we talked about beforehand, but your Emmy came kind of unexpectedly, right? Like out of the blue.
it
You weren't
did.
really aiming for it. I actually had an experience in college where I was sitting with this teacher who I frustrated her to no end because she didn't know what to do with this. She taught people who wanted to be in news generally, right? I'm like,
Oh
I want to
right.
be an animator. And she's like, what in the world? I don't know how to help you. So we're sitting in the office. She's talking about how frustrated she is with me. And this guy walked in with an Emmy.
Oh wow.
And to show his teacher, like, look what I did. And she looked at me and she's like, this guy drove me nuts like you drive me nuts. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's amazing. It's so funny. Like, I was totally not expecting it. Which I guess makes it like a really awesome surprise.
yeah,
Um, and like I got the opportunity to direct a short. So basically, I got the Emmy for working on We the People, which was a combination of Christie's company and the Obama's company, Higher Ground.
right.
And basically, it was kind of like a nod to like Schoolhouse Rock and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be less about civics, and I got that opportunity like right. I think it was like it was in a very is it very in an odd space because like I just finished on my NS3.
Right.
The hair lust stuff was happening, but like it wasn't. I it hadn't won the Academy Award yet, and
Yeah.
my dad, the bounty hunter, was starting to like we were starting to negotiate the contract for that, and she kind of came and she asked me to be a part of it, and I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. So, um, yeah, so it's just funny, like even like you know, I would say 2 years prior, 3 years prior, I would never have expected to be in that position. I was in a very bad place 2 years prior. I was like,
Yeah.
what's happening?
Which is one of those
This,
other things you have to go through. You have to go through that really
yeah.
bad place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
bad. I was like working on stuff. I'm like, this is not what I got into animation to do. And
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I should start teaching. Like
Yeah.
maybe I'm not gonna, I've been pitching for a while. Nothing was like catching.
Clicking.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was super frustrating, very frustrating
Mm-hmm.
time. So then just fast forward. I've never like if you would have told me like you'll be where I am now, like 3 years ago, I'd be like, you're crazy. You're
Yeah.
no way. Like,
Yeah.
no way. It's not good. That's impossible.
That's awesome. We definitely tend to underestimate 3 years. We tend to overestimate what we can do in
Yes.
one and underestimate
Yep.
what we can do in 3 years. So,
Yes.
yeah.
100%.
So my last
100%.
question I usually do on these shows is called the Get Wiser moment. So we can get wiser, right? Or
Yes.
I'm trying to be wiser, right? And that's my last name. But
I love it. I love it.
so the question is, if my goal is to get the highest concentration of truth into a story,
Ooh.
what approach would you recommend?
Wow, the highest amount, man. Okay, so you hit us with the tough questions at the end.
This is the
That's a
last one.
that's a really great question. Okay, so this is actually very topical because it was very important when I was working on We the People, and also there's a short that I've been kicking around in my head that is also like, oh, I want to be truthful and impactful.
Yeah.
And I think the way that you do it is you have to be completely honest with yourself in terms
Yeah.
of like really, sit back and take a look. And it's hard to be this what's the
Vulnerable.
word? Vulnerable and also kind of like objective.
Objective.
That's the word.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's really hard to kind of get objective. I think okay, this is it. This is how you do it. First of all, you kind of sit down and you have that conversation, like, you know, am I BSing anything? Is this like really like what am I really trying to say? And if and really getting to the heart of what that is. And once you think you're there, and you put it together, get 4 to 5 of your closest friends who are very critical,
honest with you, yeah,
and honest, and they're not afraid to be, and then you tell them, and then let's see if it passes their BS meter. And then if it doesn't, then you gotta question that, and then you gotta be vulnerable and objective and open-minded to really think, like, take yourself kind of out of the equation and say, like, okay, if this is a story I'm trying to tell, like, that all, like, what is the way to tell the story that stays true to what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also something just to add on to that, because I've been doing that a lot lately with some things I'm developing. This approach you talk about, like being as vulnerable as I can and as objective and as like dig down, and then put it in front of 5 people. I will say that it might seem painful at first. Just lean into that. Just lean into it. It's that good kind of like weightlifting pain. It's
no, it is.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's the pain that builds muscle, and eventually you'll enjoy it. So yeah, that was brilliant advice. My last guest said, "Be disarmingly honest." I loved that.
Oh,
so when you say
great.
something to somebody and they're like, "I can't believe that he just told me that,"
yeah,
that's the kind of effect you want with your storytelling.
That's the feedback that I think makes a difference. I'll share a really quick story with you.
Awesome.
Back when I was at Pixar, I was working on Mojo as a comic book, right? And I had this really great idea, and I thought it was super clever. And I was like, I want to pass it through a few people. And so I made like a pretty much like a mini brain trust. There were some people, like a couple, they had a story in there, some like really good like story friends, and one of my really good friends who was in development, was in the development department. And I pitched this whole thing to them, and I sat back, and they were just like, boom, it was like hit after hit after hit, and all these things. And I was like, thank you very much. It's afterwards, just like getting beaten with bamboo poles, and then saying, thank you so much, as they walk out of the room. But I tell you what, it hurt for the next couple, like day and a half, I would say.
Yeah.
But then I got to the point, like, wait, what if I did this? And there were a few things I just stripped out.
Yeah.
And what came out of that was so much stronger than what was in there before. So it's just, don't shy away from it. You got to do it. The sooner you do it, the better.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been so good to have you on the show. Is there any places or thing that you want people to follow right now and to pay attention to? Mailing lists or social media?
You can find me, like, I'm on Instagram. I'm eDogDowning on Instagram, or like I think I'm at Mr. Scribbles on Twitter.
Great.
You can find my webpage at edowning.com, but I'm looking at upgrading that soon.
Great.
And watch My Dad the Bounty Hunter. It's streaming on Netflix right now, and it's I think it's a really super fun show, so check it out.
Oh yeah, it's getting a great response. It's a good one.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. And until next time, I hope we all get a little wiser.
Thank you for watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser, audio version edited by Kira Horowitz, copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2022. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and ring that notification bell.